Greetings! This is part 2 where I will explain how Russia is exploiting its colonies and I will show you what kind of legacy it is leaving behind. Those two attributes, imperialism and legacy, are an essential part of defining what empire is. So without further ado, let's jump into imperialism attribute. Every empire that I can think of exploited its colonies, and it's not exception with modern-day Russia. We see a clear center, Moscow, and its extension, St. Petersburg, that was founded by Peter the Great to be the new capital. Both of those metropolitan areas are wealthy, modern cities with high standards of living. Yet, the further you move away from them, the more poverty and devastation you start to see as the result of exploitation. As a fun example, let's take a look at the richest region of Russia in terms of natural resources, which is Sakha Republic, or another name of it, Yakutiya. Sakha Republic produces 99% of all Russian diamonds, a quarter of world diamond production. Besides diamonds, in 2020 they produced 40 tons of gold. Quick search in Google reveals that amounts to about $2.4 billion revenue of just gold being sold. Apart from gold and diamonds, Sakha is also rich on oil and gas, producing a third amount that Russia exports. On top of that, the region is also producing uranium, iron, coal, tin, mercury, you name it. I couldn't find the exact statistics, but I think it's safe to estimate that this region is producing natural resources worth of 50 billions or more annually. For comparisons just how much that is, Burj Khalifa in Dubai costed $1.5 billion to construct. So now let's do a fun experiment. Let's check on Google Street View the wealthiest city in this region, which would be the capital, Yakutsk. Let's just see how people live in the wealthiest region in Russia in terms of natural resources. And knowing nothing about this region, I would assume they're gonna live like Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Norway, who also have lots of natural resources. Here we see Sakha Republic with the capital of Yakutsk. And for our experiment, I'm gonna place this Google Street View guy somewhere outside of the city center, preferably on the crossroads, so that we could see. I mean, that's neat. There is no asphalt road, June 2017. Let's see. I've actually prepared some places to specifically take a look for. All right, so instantly this is July 2021 and there is no asphalt road. There is a trash laying on the ground. People miss the container. What's going on with the air? Why is it the same color as the dirt? This looks like a horror of living to me, honestly. A very well dressed and clean, I think it's a grandma and a grandchild walking in this dirt. Decent looking cars I see Russians have, so it seems like, I mean, oh wow, this is classic Russians. Look at those tracks, Adidas. Here we see the asphalt road, but why there is no asphalt road going on there? Do they not have enough money in the region that produces over 50 billions? All right, let's check out something closer to the city center, right here. All right, wow, yeah, if you just immediately see this picture, can you say that this is from the region that produces billions of dollars of natural resources? I see there's some remains of an asphalt road, clearly hasn't been maintained in a while. I see already not as good cars. Okay, but you know what's really important here on this picture, on this frame? Those barracks that people live in. Look at their conditions and look how many of them there are here. There's just like a massive block of barracks with people continuing to live here. Living conditions there are just horrendous. There is no running water there. People are forced to obtain it from water pumps outside. If it's freezing temperatures, no one cares. And actually, according to Russian statistics, in 2018, 12 million Russians live without no water in their house. That means they have to shower outside. Also, those barracks don't have a centralized sewage systems. Again, according to Russian statistics, which I'm sure are sugar-coated, 22% of Russian populations live without sewage, which amounts to about 30 million people. 30 million people, that's like an entire state of Texas having to go to the bathroom outside. There's also a problem of overcrowding in those barracks because they were meant for 1-2 people per room, but usually there are whole families of 5 and 8 people living there. And probably the worst of all, those wooden barracks are at a constant hazard of being burned out because they're wooden, and collapse because they were actually meant to be as a temporary housing for workers for 20-30 years built by Stalin, but they're standing over 100 years now. And also, while researching this topic about Sakha Republic, I've discovered that it has a huge trash problem. Here's an article from 2018 saying that despite paying for garbage collection, it's still laying around with a very picturesque photo, wooden barracks, dirt and trash. The other article from 2021 reported about dumpsters overflowing in Yakutiya with a picture of a man walking among piles of trash. On top of that, as we saw on Google Street View, Yakutiya has a huge ecological problems. All those intensive resource excavations without proper regulations deal a big toll on the environment. For example, air pollution in August 2021 was 247 times higher than the norm. The similar situation is with water, ground and rivers. Other towns in Sakha Republic are even worse. Let's take a peek at the town in Sakha Republic called Mirniy, which has the 4th largest diamond production mine in the world. When we zoom into Mirniy, we instantly see a gaping hole as a result of diamond production. No wonder Sakha Republic is 99% of all diamond production in Russia. So now let's place Google Street View guy somewhere on the crossroads far from city center in a residential area. Boom. And instantly, I don't see that this is a capital of diamond production. I mean, look at this place. Where is all the money going? We can clearly see that the revenues from natural resources production do not end up in this town. They clearly end up somewhere else. And that somewhere else is the center, Moscow, that is draining the resources from the regions. There's one more example I would like to show you how people live in another region of Russia called Zabaikalsky Krai. I'm gonna check out its capital, Chita. This footage is actually from a YouTube episode made by Russian blogger Varlamov. I'll link this episode in the description so you can check out the full episode if you're curious. Varlamov actually exposes many other provinces like this in Russia, and Chita is probably not even the worst of them. So here it is.
Двухэтажные дома, в которых народ живет. И вот у них в центре почему-то какая-то свалка. Подожди, а это туалеты? Вот это туалет. Это туалет. Ну да, здесь уже помойка. Такой вот вход в дома, тоже через мусор. Как в Африке. Вот в Африке примерно такая же картина. Когда какие-то квартиры выселены, какие-то сгоревшие, но в нем продолжают жить люди. И вокруг просто какая-то дичайшая, жутчайшая помойка. Это прям кругло такая помойка, да?
Да, везде, вот куда вот сейчас по острову пройти, везде помойки такие стоят.
Кошмар.
А летом здесь вообще никто не проходит уже. Все в круговую ходим.
А, потому что здесь воняет, да?
Ну, конечно.
Но это ни окна не открыть в доме, да?
Ничего, ничего. Вот я говорю, хоть может вы разместите куда-то.
No wonder Russians are not bothered by sanctions, because they literally have nothing to lose. And no wonder Russians are easily mobilized close to 1 million of people to go and fight the war. Because for many of them, military is the only source of decent income. In fact, I've seen Russian ads promoting military service based on financial gain. For example, this Russian commercial portrays a grandpa who, because of the poverty, is forced to sell his favorite car. But the grandchild does a good deed. He signs a contract with the military and saves the car from being sold. This is the narrative of an ad. Why you should join an army, seriously. But it gets worse or better, I don't know how to say it. There was a news segment cast that broadcasted how parents used a payout from their son who died in the war to buy a brand new car. A brand new car that average Russian can never afford. Then this news segment proceeds to portray the perks of this brand new car and shows how parents drive it to the grave of their son. Wow, if this wasn't creepy enough, according to this Russian opposition journalist, this news segment was not broadcasted in Moscow, implying that this was a commercial targeted on poor regions of Russia to encourage the parents to send their son to war. Wow, but wait, there is even more. Recently there was a law adopted in Russia that waives a mortgage if your relative was wounded or deceased in the war, making the encouragement even more for parents to send their child away. So here we start to notice another type of exploitation that the empire is doing, exploiting the people that are living in those colonies. According to the British intelligence, in many regions of Russia, death rate is 30-40 times higher than in Moscow. As Russia continues to suffer extremely heavy casualties, the impact varies dramatically across Russia's regions. In proportion to the size of their population, the richest cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg have been left relatively unscathed. And what is that if not a clear sign of an empire? A wealthy center exploiting its peripheries. First, capturing people by force, then through generations brainwashing them to be Russian. All meanwhile extracting all the resources from this region, making it poor, and then leaving those people no choice but to go and fight the empire's pointless in 21st century wars. This way Russia is killing two birds with one stone. First, they're eliminating minorities that potentially could have seceded from Russia, and second, they're having a cannon fodder to fuel its expansionist war. Also, it's not just British intelligence showing those reports. I've seen reports from independent Russian journalists showing casualty rates being 60 times higher in regions versus in Moscow. I've listened to dozens of interviews of Russian prisoners of war, and many of them indeed confirm they went to war because they needed money. A lot of them never saw a washing machine or a ceramic toilet, which is no wonder why Russians are looting so much. And speaking about Russians looting, I have a funny and at the same time eerie incident to share with you. A Russian soldier from Buryatia stole a webcam in Ukraine, which kept broadcasting footage into the internet. We could observe the poverty and miserable conditions that this Buryat family is living. And the eerie part about this example is that this soldier, in a way, is fighting this war to preserve those conditions where his family cannot afford a webcam. Not to mention completely failing to see how empire is abusing them for their own gain. Like, how does the war benefit Buryats 8,000 kilometers away from Ukraine? I have much more content to share in this segment, like poverty that we see at the funerals of Russian soldiers, or the trashy conditions of many other Russian cities, or how badly Russians are being treated by the government. But I think the arguments I presented above are well sufficient enough to conclude that the imperialism attribute of exploitation clearly applies to modern-day Russia. Legacy. Empires leave a lasting impact on the regions and peoples they dominate, shaping their history, culture, and political systems for generations to come. This attribute seems to be a bit elusive, so I asked Chat GPT to give me a legacy example of Russian Empire. The answer it gave me is quite pitiful. Cultural contributions. One does not need to be an empire to produce talented people. I also feel like we don't know about a lot of talented people from other countries just because their country was not as powerful. Mykola Leontovich, a composer of the famous Carol of the Bells from Ukraine, comes to mind. Or somebody like Nikolai Tesla from Croatia. I believe that every nation throughout their history has talented people, and in comparisons, I don't think Russian culture is somewhat better or bigger. I just think it's more famous because Russia is much more powerful. Now, on that note, Russia was not and is not a place where talented people bloom. Just to name a few examples: Dostoevsky murdered, Pushkin killed, Lermontov killed, Turgenev exiled. Or maybe, just maybe, these hardships and adversity within the country is actually what created such a powerful cultural impact. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. I really don't know what to think here. Now, moving on to second legacy, scientific achievements. And I completely disagree here with the AI. As I have presented in my previous video, Russia does not really have its own achievements. Most of them are appropriated or built upon the scientists of other cultures. All the smartest people have left Russia when they got a chance, and most of them are now working in the Silicon Valley. Wasn't the founder of Google from Russia? Now, political influence. Well, this one is more of a control attribute that I've discussed earlier. Number 4, sports, and this is just laughable that Chat GPT is listening here. Considering Russia state-run doping program, amazing how they could have gotten away with very little consequences. Watch the Oscar-winning documentary Icarus. You're gonna love it. Military might. That one has proven to be just on the paper. Or 30 years ago, we can clearly see that there is no military might in Russia right now. 6, technology. And this is the same as scientific achievements. Can you name me any technological invention that Russia did for the last 30 years? I surely can't. Looking at the response that Chat GPT generated for me, it's amazing how Russia got us all fooled. But it's time to tear down its facade, and this is what I'm trying to do on this channel, one video at a time. So I asked ChatGPT to give me a more precise example of legacy attribute, on which it was mostly repeating other points about expansionism and diversity. However, last paragraph was interesting. The Russian Empire's legacy of centralized authoritarianism has also contributed to the country's current struggles with corruption, lack of transparency, and a weak civil society. And this is actually a really good example of modern-day Russia matching the legacy example. And I think a good place to start would be Berlin, or more precisely, East Berlin. There are a lot of people that are loyal to Russia here. When I was in Berlin, I saw a gathering of Germans rooting to disband NATO and to not give weapons to Ukraine. And according to a recent poll, in Eastern Germany, 25% of Germans are culturally tied to Russia, versus just 7% in West Germany, where Russia never reached. Also, we can take a look at Czech Republic, that had a pro-Russian president until recently. And that's despite Prague Spring Uprising that Russians drowned in tanks and blood. On an interesting side note, my dad, who was in the Soviet army in 1989, was part of an occupation force of Czechoslovakia. Moldova, until 2020, had a very pro-Russian president too, despite part of Moldova being occupied by Russia since 1992, the Transnistria. And so does Georgia, the country. Today has part of its territory occupied by Russia since 2008, but has a very pro-Russian government that just recently tried to copy Russian laws, which sparked big protests, and they had to revoke those. And look at the Russian legacy in Belarus. Poor Belarus. They say if you want to see what Soviet Union was like, go visit Minsk. And I completely agree with that. I've been to Minsk a couple times and it's an eerie feeling. And of course, a really good example of Russian legacy is my home country, Ukraine. 17% of Ukrainians voted a pro-Russian party into Ukraine's parliament. A lot of people were sad and against toppling down Lenin's. Lenin, let me remind you, is the guy who invented genocide by starvation. He's the one who invented Red Terror, opening fire at people on random. So I think we see the legacy Russia is leaving behind, legacy in form of lies where people are reminiscent of Russia being there, while in reality they're reminiscent about illusions that Russia has built for them. We can clearly see Russia meant no good for any people it captured. How can you argue with the fact that Russia was ready to kill people that were willing to live it in East Berlin? And the other legacy of corruption, we can also actually a little bit see that on this map that shows us corruption. We see how in Eurasia, Russia is actually like an epicenter of corruption, and then the further you go away from it, the less of corruption there is. We see that clearly in Ukraine, Belarus, Poland. The corruption kind of fades away the further away you move from Russia. I don't think it's a coincidence, of course, with the exception of Finland, that was never part of Soviet Union and was much closely tied to Scandinavian countries. So yeah, Russia is leaving behind it not aqueducts and coliseums, it's leaving behind brainwashed people and corruption. Corruption that is also, by the way, present wherever Russia touches, like the FIFA, how they won it. Well, there you have it, guys. What do you think of my arguments supporting a claim that modern-day Russia is an empire? The definition of an empire is really vast and complex. It includes empires like the mysterious Inca Empire that didn't even have writing, and it includes a fictional galactic empire in Star Wars universe. But I believe Chat GPT was very accurate here at defining the 6 characteristics that all of those empires have in common. And as you can see, Russia has a very strong match on all 6 of them. I have no doubts that modern-day Russia is an empire. And the good part about it being that all empires fall. This is just an absolute law of history. Thank you very much for watching this. Please consider sharing this if you liked it, leaving a comment. I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time.